On the Spot takes you north to the Klondike, Gold Rush land. This is Bob Anderson of the National Film Board. In 1898, gold was discovered in the Yukon. And at the same time, a strange epidemic of a disease called gold fever spread around the world, and its victims found themselves irretrievably drawn toward northwest Canada. The poet Robert W. Service, the bard of the Yukon, helped to spread the fame of this land, and in the film you're about to see, you'll get a taste of his salty sourdough observations. Not many tourists have visited the Klondike. It was just too hard to get at. But now things have changed, and they're running regular excursions. You fly up to Whitehorse, then you get on a stern-wheel river steamer, and you follow the trail of 98. We sent a film crew on one of these excursions. Let's join them now and Fred Davis as they go down the Yukon River north to Dawson City.
Steamer Klondike is of a younger generation of the riverboats which carried the gold-hungry thousands during the rush. It draws about 3 feet of water and requires tricky navigation to avoid the many sandbars and islands in the river.
Hello, Captain Bromley.
Hello, Fred. How are you today?
Very well, thank you.
Are you enjoying the cruise?
Yes, every minute of it. I thought this
Good.
might be a good time to accept your invitation and visit you in the wheelhouse. I suppose you've been sailing these waters for quite a few years, have you?
Yes, this is 31 years I've been with the company here and sailing on the Yukon River.
Do you consider that the Yukon is a difficult river to navigate?
Oh, yes, we have lots of troubles here with the sandbars and the islands moving and channels changing, and keeps us on the lookout all the time.
How would you know that a channel had changed?
Well, after years of experience on this kind of work, you get so that you can read the water, and the different whirlpools indicate different depths of water, and that's what we are continually on the lookout for.
I see. I suppose in the old days, if the men hadn't had that experience, there would be a lot of running aground, would there?
Well, they did have a lot of trouble because they weren't educated or trained the way we have been today.
How about in your early experience? Did you ever run aground yourself?
Oh, yes, I've had my troubles with the others on the rivers here. Everybody has them that sails these rivers.
Captain, what would you do about it if you did run aground?
Well, we carry all the equipment here, spars and cables, and depending on the position you're in and where your deep water is, you'd run cables ashore and put them on your steam winch and pull yourself off in that way.
So you don't have to depend on anybody else's help, eh?
No, you've got to be on your own when you're on these rivers.
Mm-hmm. I suppose you notice quite a difference in river traffic today as opposed to the old days.
Oh, yes, because we didn't have the airplanes up here then or the highways, and we had to do it all ourselves. And all local and tourist traffic, we were loaded all the time.
Mm-hmm. And you'd be freight carriers too then, I suppose.
Oh, yes. Freight was our main cargo here.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, look at the quaint old cabin.
The early riverboats generated their steam by burning wood, and this place, called Erickson, was a wood supply point. Thousands of cords of wood used to be stacked along the shores.
Head one.
Dawson City, at the forks of the Yukon and Klondike rivers, has a population today of approximately 700, as opposed to the gold rush days when it mushroomed into a community of 50,000.
Welcome to Dawson, folks.
The old-time greeting by the citizens of Dawson is only part of the entertainment in store for the excursion tourists. They're taken to many historic spots. They pan for gold in the streams, and they also witness the reconstruction of some of the famous old events and legends, such as the shooting of Dan McGrew, reenacted by the local high school students.
The thought came back of an ancient wrong, and it stung like a frozen lash. And the lust awoke to kill, to kill. Then the music stopped with a crack. And the stranger turned, and his eyes they burned in a most peculiar way. In a buckskin shirt that was glazed with dirt, he sat, and I saw him sway. And his lips went in a kind of grin, and he spoke, and his voice was calm.
You boys don't know me, and none of you'll care a damn. I want to state that my words are straight. I bet my poke they're true. But one of you is a hound of hell, and that one's Dan McGrew.
Then I ducked my head, and the lights went out, and two guns blazed in the dark. And a woman screamed. And the lights went up, and two men lay stiff and stark. Pitched on his head and pumped full of lead was dangerous Dan McGrew, while the man from the creeks lay clutched to the breast of the lady that's known as Lou. These are the simple facts of the case, and I guess I ought to know. They say that the stranger was crazed with hooch, and I'm not denying it's so. I'm not so wise as the lawyer guys, but strictly between us two, the woman that kissed him and pinched his poke was the lady that's known as Lou.
I've read and heard so much about the famous Klondike Gold Rush of 1898 that I just couldn't wait to try my luck at panning for gold here. So far, I haven't exactly been blinded by the glitter of gold in this pan, but then times have changed since the old gold rush days, and the chances of an individual striking it rich today are very small. However, there still are a few miners
who are working the old streams and managing to make a modest living. Right now, I'm standing on the bank of Bonanza Creek in the heart of the Klondike in the Yukon. And these names still carry a ring of adventure and romance.
And I'm at the working property of Harry Lehman, one of the real old-timers in the Yukon. He's just brought out a load of dirt from one of his tunnels, which he's going to wash for gold. Harry, when did you first arrive in the Klondike?
Arrived in June, in 99.
1899.
1899.
Well, I guess the gold rush was in full swing then, was it?
That was really the height of the gold rush. Yeah.
Now, what way did you come in here?
I come by Skagway, of course, by boat up the Skagway, and then over the trail, Chilcoot Pass, and
you walked that, did you, from Skagway?
Walked that from Skagway.
And then did you use the river?
Used the river coming down with a small boat.
Oh, I see.
Followed the river. Twice we got held up with ice jams. Well, I got caught in one.
That's so.
Yeah.
I heard something about a government regulation in those days that a man had to have a year's provisions before they'd let him into this country. Is that true?
Yes, that was right. You had to have 5,000 pounds.
5,000 pounds, and you had to carry that all yourself?
You had to carry it yourself.
Well, now, how did you work that, coming all that distance? I guess that's... Do you know how many miles that is from Skagway in here?
Well, it would be, I would say, close to 600 miles.
Is that a fact?
I think it'd be all of that. Yeah.
Well, then how would a man pack 5,000 pounds?
Well, of course, he wouldn't pack it all at one time.
No?
No, he'd... well, of course...
Go back in relays, would you?
They would relay, say, about 5 miles.
So in that case, you walked that 600 miles many times over?
Many times over. You walked that, yes.
Well, Harry, since you arrived in here in 1899, have you had any trips to the outside?
No. I've never had any desire to go outside.
Quite happy to stay here, eh?
Yes.
Well, thank you very much, Harry. Although the lush days of the individual finding gold in large quantities are over, the mining companies know that gold still remains in this area. And one of the most effective ways of prying it loose from the creek beds is by the use of huge dredges. The continuously moving digging ladder scoops up the bed rock from 40 feet below the surface and deposits its load inside the dredge where the gold is washed out of it. Then the washed gravel is deposited at the rear of the dredge. The floating dredge chews its way slowly up a creek bed for many miles. Center of all the hectic gold rush days was Dawson City, as the famous gold-producing creeks were all within close distance. A large number of the original hastily constructed buildings still remain, forlorn, but with memories of the once bustling streets. The cabin of Robert Service is a highlight for tourists visiting Dawson City. This building was Dawson City's first hotel. It was called the American. Crate's auction store is well remembered by old-timers here. Sales were held every night, auctioning off every conceivable kind of merchandise. 36 hotels and saloons dotted the city in its heyday, and the Royal Alexandra Hotel was one of the popular spots. Here, the famous Florodora Girls performed. The Auditorium Theater was a combination opera house, nightclub, and gambling hall. Miners flocked here by the thousands, and many famous personalities performed or worked here. One of the old-timers still living in Dawson City and who performed here is Alec Adams. This building has become his responsibility, and he delights in showing tourists through it and telling them about the old days. Hello, Alec.
Hello, Fred.
I understand that you were a performer here back in the gold rush days. Just exactly what did you do?
I used to tap dance on the stage here the first 2 years.
Wow.
I had 2 lady partners. One was a singer and the other was a comedian.
And did you always work here at the Auditorium Theater?
No, we used to go from here down to McDonald and Nelson and put our part on there. And from there we went down to the Floridora and put it on there.
All in the same night?
All in the same night, but I only got $75 a night, and that wasn't enough. I quit.
Well, I guess that wasn't considered big money in those days.
No,
eh?
no.
Well, now, is this building still in the same condition it was in those
Just
days?
exactly the same as it was. Come on in and have a look at it.
Fine.
Now, that picture was here in early days.
Well, I'm surprised to see it's in such good condition. I thought with all the rowdiness in a place like this, it might get damaged.
Well, there was no rowdiness in here at all. You'd see 1,500, 2,000 men in here all drinking and drunk. And a crossword you never heard.
Is that so?
Never.
Well, now, what would happen first when a man had come in the door?
Well, they'd just come in there, and a big bunch of them would scatter into the gambling tables, and the rest would stray along in the hall there with their hobnail boots and gum boots and muddy overalls and dirty shorts.
Yeah.
And them girls were dressed up beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
They'd tap you on the shoulder and say, "Won't you dance?" I never saw a fella turn and run. He'd start off from there and maybe get halfway across the floor. The floor manager clapped his hands. You took her back to the bar. That was $1.50. If you bought her a drink, it was $2.50. And the girls on the stage would come out and cut right in the middle of their song and say Mary, or whatever her name was beefing because she couldn't dance 3 times in 2 minutes.
And her making $1.50 every dance. Eh?
$1.50 every dance. This auditorium stage here has seen a lot of famous people, such as Douglas Fairbanks, Tex Rickard, Alec Pantages, Marjorie Rambo, Klondike Kate, and many more I could name.
Well, and this is the stage where you used to do your own routine, eh?
Yes,
That tap dancing?
Yes, I used to do it right here.
You don't suppose you could do some dancing for me now, could you?
Well, might do a little, not very much.
All right. That's very good.
Well, I'd do more only. I'm 79 years old, and I think that's enough for...
It certainly is. I hope
For
I can
my
do
age.
as well at 79. Well, what about the balcony upstairs, Alec? Could we have a look at that now?
Oh, yes, sure.
What kind of lights did you have in here for the footlights,
Well,
Alec?
the first month we had acetylene gas, and then the 1st of October we had electric lights.
That was October of 99, was it?
October of 99, yes.
Now, are these all the private boxes along
These
here,
are
Alec?
all private boxes along here where the fellas took their girls in and bought them champagne at $35 a bottle and looked at the show.
Well, now, was that the most expensive drink in the house?
Well, it was $15 a bottle on the first floor, 20 on the second, and 35 on the top on this one.
Mm-hmm.
And I never saw a fellow cheap enough to buy order 1 bottle and 2 straws. They'd always ask for 2 bottles. That was $70 for the first drink.
That's pretty expensive. Well, how did they pay for it? With gold
They
dust?
paid for it all in gold dust. You'd give the usher your poke up here, and he took it down in the bottom in the bar and waited.
And you could trust them, could you?
Well, you could trust him because if he cheated you out of a quarter of a grain and the boss fella found it out, that was the last of his job.
I see. So what happened to the fellas when they ran out of the gold dust?
Well, the girl would want another small bottle, and he'd say, "Well, I'm sorry, but I'm out of dust." She'd just laugh and start to sing. And a part of the chorus, they'd all take it up around the hall, and a part of the chorus was, "You couldn't have been very dusty when you first blew in."
That's wonderful. Well, don't tell me you had a movie projector in here, too.
Oh, yes, we had one of those old crank-style fellas.
When did that come in?
It come in 1910. And a man or a girl had to stand there and crank it for 2 hours and a half.
Now, to keep the film moving, you just had to turn this handle, did you?
Yes, and if you turned it too fast, the picture would flicker. And some drunk down there in the crowd would holler, "Throw her out."
Well, Alec, I want to thank you very much for showing me around the auditorium.
You're welcome indeed, and I hope you come back again, and I'll have to show you over.
Fine, thank you.
The Yukon is often referred to as the land of the midnight sun. That's because during the summer months, there is no time when it actually gets pitch dark during any 24-hour period. As a matter of fact, right now it's almost midnight. It's difficult for outsiders to accustom themselves to going to bed when it's still light. However, that's where I'm headed right now, because at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, we're catching the river steamer for the return trip to Whitehorse.
Well, there you have Gold Rush Land. The shooting of Dan McGrew, the very grown-up play that you saw the school children of Dawson put on, is from the collected poems of Robert W. Service, published by the Ryerson Press. Now, we still have some ground to cover on this journey of reminiscence to the Klondike, and the guide for the rest of your trip will be Stan Hellier.
Not all the living men of the Klondike are still there. All over Canada, you'll find bright-eyed old gentlemen who were part of that wonderful gold rush of more than half a century ago. We're lucky enough today to have 3 of them in the studio here with us to talk over old times. Well, I'd like you to meet these 3 hardy Yukon pioneers. On my right is Mr. Christopher Turner, who is 86. Mr. Turner was mainly a logger and teamster in the Yukon, but I'm sure he found time to do a lot of shrewd panning on the side. Next to Mr. Turner is Mr. Robert Graham, who is the baby of the group at 78. From Mr. Graham's crisp military bearing, you can gather that he was a member of the Yukon Field Force. Boer War followed that, then the First Great War. On Mr. Graham's right is Mr. Hammond, who is the daddy of the group at 89. You're a member of the Sourdough Association, aren't you, Mr. Turner?
Sourdough?
Yes. What is a sourdough?
Well, I don't believe I ever tasted sourdough.
Oh, sourdough was something...
Oh, well, you see, this man will tell you better how to make it, but I never made it, and I don't believe I ever used it.
Well, it's just the same as yeast, you know. Sourdough, as I understand it. I never saw it, really. But it's just about the same as yeast for bread, in raising bread. You use the sourdough for that purpose. You don't eat the sourdough.
Mr. Graham, just what is your job as a commissionaire?
I'm on the museum. I'm on the, what they call, there's 2 parts in it. There's the museum and there's the art gallery. I'm on the art gallery on days. That's where all the paintings are.
This must be really a switch from the days when you were in the Yukon as a field force policeman.
Yes, quite a difference, sir.
Imagine times were pretty rough in the Yukon for a policeman.
Yes, it was pretty hard. You see, we were attached to the old Northwest Mounted Police. There was 200 of us sent out there. We done guard on the banks, inside and out, and prisoners escort. There was a jail there, and there was about 100 prisoners in it. And we took them out working, sawing wood, and so forth, sir.
Mr. Graham, tell us something about the nightlife in those days.
Now, the Monte Carlo, that was a famous place there. When you came in, the first was a bar. And you opened the door, and you went in, and there was all the gambling games that was in the Monte Carlo. Then you opened another door, and you went into the theater. And in the theater was all those boxes like you showed us the other night, named after the creek, Eldorado, Hunker, Gold Bottom, Dominion. And if you went up there for a drink, you'd perhaps pay $80 for a bottle of wine and $1.50 for a drink. The actresses would be in there between times. And afterwards, they would be square dancing from that until maybe 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning. The square dancing was just as described. When you were showing that picture, you know, it was just very short. And after the last was belly up to the bar, and there was $1.50 a drink there, and the lady got a ticket and put it in her sock.
I believe the term hooch originated in the Klondike. Is that right?
Hooch, one of our fellows used to say it was a mixture of carbolic acid and cayenne pepper and blue vitriol. He said it was that bad he had to take a drink of coal oil to get the bad taste out of it.
Earlier you were telling me about a 1-barrel bar in Dawson.
Well, now, sometimes they would be all playing poker. This was at Fort Selkirk. It was an Indian village, and Church of England mission and the Roman Catholic mission. The rest was all saloons. Sometimes he'd run out of booze. He'd say, "Wait a minute, boys, I'm out of booze." And he'd go inside and roll out a keg. And the fella would come in, "What's yours, Scotch? What's yours, rye?" Yes. What you were, James. All came out of the same bar. He used to laugh about it himself.
Mr. Graham, we all know there were men in the Yukon. What about the ladies? What about Klondike Kate? Did you know her?
Well, I've seen her on the stage, you know, in the Monte Carlo.
Oh, some good, respectable women up there.
There's the Moore sisters, the three of them. And, there was another one with red hair.
I bet she was
called her Nell. I won't say horse something Nell. You can guess at the other word. Her hair was red. She could whinny like a horse.
Some real characters among those women.
Yes.
Well, the Yukon must have been a very cosmopolitan place in those days. Somebody told me there were 40 or 50 different nationalities represented.
Well, I don't doubt but what there was. Now, those people, that even Laplanders, there was Laplanders there with their reindeer going into the country. There was fellows from Sweden, Denmark, France, and all these foreign countries where you wouldn't think the news of the gold rush would ever get into that country.
Well, now, how did you cope with the food situation in the Yukon? What did you eat mostly?
Oh, the ordinary. We had rice and beans and bacon and meat the most of the time, fresh meat. We killed a couple of moose in the fall.
And you hunted these moose yourself?
I got an Indian with me. We went up the Klondike River, and we got a couple of moose and brought them down, and we kept some of it for our own use, and we sold the rest. We got $1.50 a pound for it in those days. We made about $500 apiece.
Mr. Hammond, we happen to have a gold pan here from the Yukon. Could you show us how it was used?
Well, you fill the pan. We take the pan up into the cabin, and you dip it down in the tub of water, and you shake it. And you keep shaking it. And, of course, if there's, any stones on the top or gravel, anyways large, you take that out and throw it to one side, and you keep on shaking, you see, like that. And if there's any gold, it naturally gets to the bottom because it's so much heavier than the gravel.
Mr. Hammond, I noticed you have a nugget on your watch chain. Could I see it?
Yes.
Show it to me? What's the story behind that nugget?
Well, nothing more than we dug it out with the rest of the gold we got. It was amongst the other gold. The gold is not all as coarse as this. Some is very fine, some is as fine as sand. And then there's others. This was about the largest one we got in the winter's work. Of course, the gold is taken out in the winter and washed in the spring when the water runs. All water is frozen up in the winter. That's in small streams. Of course, the Klondike River or the Yukon and all those big streams, they don't freeze up in the winter.
They call that placer mining, don't they? It's distinguished from deep rock mining.
Yes. The mining in New Ontario is different mining. It's mined out of the rock. The rock is crushed and the gold is extracted that way.
Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you very much for coming down here today and telling us your stories of your experiences in the Yukon. I know you made the fabulous territory relive for me, and I'm sure you did the same for all the people watching you through their television sets.
On the Spot is a production of the National Film Board. The film was directed by Alan Stark, photographed by Donald Wilder, narrated by Fred Davis, and edited by Marion Meadows. Mr. Hammond, Mr. Graham, and Mr. Turner were interviewed by Stan Hellier. Supervising editor was David Mayerovich, and the producer, Robert Anderson.